Hello and welcome to the epic showdown between Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen. This is the first encounter in the past 16 years of these two great chess players, arguably the best players ever. And they are playing at a Feher random tournament. So Feher random is the chess when the starting position is just randomized. The other name is chess 960. And actually, they are playing in the second round of this tournament. Both players won in the first round, so everything is set up for a spectacular game. But actually, just before the game, we could be a little bit disappointed because, as I said, the starting position is randomized. But if you look at the chessboard, you probably first don't even see what is different from the regular starting position. So the only thing that actually changed here is that the king and the bishop switched position. So, well, it's not going to be a very different game from a usual chess game. So, well, let's get started. Kasparov started with d4, d5, comes e3, e6, knight f3, knight f6. We are going to have a very regular queen's gambit, c4, and after a6, knight c3, Carlsen decided to essentially play the queen's gambit accepted. So d takes c4 and bishop takes c4. So again, the only unusual thing in the position that these guys are just switched. But apart from that, everything looks very normal. And we could also say that after castling, so castling goes in the Feher random as normal. So long castle means the kings ends up on c1, the rook on d1, and short castling means the kings go to g1 and the rook goes to f1. So after making this castling move, most likely the position is going to be just very normal. So Carlsen continued with c5, and here Garry played a strange looking move, or basically he goes for this d takes c5, so the queen's gambit without the queens. Eventually comes bishop takes c5, queen d8, king d8, and in this position comes the first strange move, because Garry decided to play the move bishop d3. And frankly, this is very hard to understand why he made this move. So he probably prepares something like knight e4 in the future, but we will see that he's actually not doing that. So, well, bishop d3 is quite strange to me. Now comes king e7, and in this position Kasparov castles. Then comes knight c6, and as mentioned before, so this knight e4 is the plan, but the bishop actually is not needed to support this, because now comes knight g5, and the knight can go to e4 anyway. Carlsen plays very normal moves: rook d8, knight e4, takes, bishop b6, bishop c3, and in this position Carlsen plays the move f6 that not only blocks the bishop of white, but also prepares bishop g6 in the future. And in this position, Kasparov decided that, well, it's enough from this very regular looking game, and let's heat it up and play the move g4. The idea is clear: he wants to play g5 and open up the diagonal of his dark squared bishop. But Carlsen reacted very well. So here I invite you to stop the video and try to figure out how to continue with black. So despite that usually when I ask you to stop the video there is some tactical solution, now you have to make a strong positional move. So white's best piece is this bishop on c3. So what black does is eliminates this bishop by exchanging it, bishop e5, very strong move. Here comes takes, bishop c2, bishop c6, and we can see that slowly Carlsen is taking over the game. So now there is the spin. So Kasparov decided to play rook g1, comes knight c4, and after taking on d8, Kasparov finally makes the move g5 that he was preparing 5 moves ago. Comes f5, knight c3, and knight e5. So here we can see that already the black pieces are incredibly well placed and active. This knight is amazing, the bishop on the long diagonal is very strong, the rook is on this open file, and actually this g-pawn is more of a weakness than a strong pawn. However, now Garry plays the move f4, and after knight f3, rook g2, comes g6. And actually in this position, Carlsen had a very interesting idea to playing the move knight e1. so going with the video knight all the way to e1. But here Carlsen can eliminate the bishop of Kasparov, and then go for the endgame where the bishop is a lot stronger than the knight. This is not what the Carlsen did. What he did was playing g6 and then preparing the move e5 later. So I didn't mention the time control, so both players have 20 minutes for the whole game and 10-second increments. But actually Kasparov, being the older out of the two, actually a lot older, so Carlsen is 30, Kasparov is 57, so there is a huge age difference. Kasparov was playing significantly slower, and here he only had a couple of minutes, while Carlsen had more than 10 minutes left on his clock. So, well, everything seems to go into Carlsen's favor, and he continues to strengthen his position with g6, and after rook f2 comes the move e5. And while Kasparov doesn't like defending passively, so he decided to sort of break out and make the move e4. However, Carlsen reacts very well, so he takes on e4. And here Kasparov actually doesn't really have a good way to react. So the problem is, if you take with the bishop, that looks most natural at first, and after bishop takes a4, knight takes e4, now it seems like that white is threatening to take the knight, and the knight is the one that protects the e5 pawn, so if the knight moves, then white can just take on e5. But Carlsen here has a very good move in his pocket, which is knight e1. And knight e1 threatens knight d3 fork, and also threatens this pawn later, not just the rook. So the problem for Kasparov here is that he's going to lose his pawn, so after knight c5, rook d5, Kasparov is just in trouble. So he couldn't take back with the bishop, so he had to take with the knight. But now the problem is that the black knight goes to d4, amazing central square, and threatens to take the bishop and then take the knight. So yeah, still Kasparov cannot take this pawn on e5. Has to waste one more tempi. Comes knight g3, but after knight c2, king c2, now Carlsen could play rook f8, pinning the rook, and very clearly his plan is to just take on f4, and this bishop is a dominant piece compared to this knight. So one thing that Kasparov could have done is just playing rook e2, but after rook f4, rook e5, even though the material is temporarily equal, the black pieces are just dominant. The white pieces after rook a2, rook g4, this knight is horrible. Very soon this pawn is going to be eaten up by the rook, and Carlsen is doing amazingly well. So actually I put this quote that from Kasparov, that a good chess player doesn't allow his opponent to show their strengths. Well, Carlsen is arguably the best endgame player ever, and Kasparov is playing an endgame against Carlsen. So Kasparov was not particularly good at trying to keep his own quote, his own ideas. So here Kasparov played knight e2, but still the pin is still there, and all these pieces are just very passive. Here comes king e6, king d2, and bishop b5. As we are used to, Carlsen is playing the endgame super strong. And here comes the move rook f3. Actually, in this position, well, Carlsen just makes a huge blunder. So here, if you are black, what you could do is just take on e2, takes back, and then, well, either e takes or rook f2 takes f4. Black pieces are very active, there is a pawn up. Carlsen is the best endgame player, arguably ever. There is no way Kasparov saves this. But surprisingly, Carlsen just blundered. Carlsen played the move rook f7, and here Kasparov was able to play rook e3, and after bishop e2, there is this intermediate check that allows Kasparov to at least temporarily survive. Comes king d6, king e2, and rook takes f4. Rook took on e2, and rook takes f4. So probably Kasparov felt like, yeah, he survived the hardest part. This is actually still not a very pleasant endgame for white. This pawn is very weak, the black pieces are actually very active, this rook is not yet, the e2 rook is not yet too active, so he's actually still in some sort of trouble. And here still Kasparov should defend very well. So the best move is probably rook e3, trying to activate the rook, going here, there, probably checking, needing to defend if needed. So rook e3 was by far the best move. But what Kasparov did, he just played the move king e3, and here Carlsen just plays rook g4 and going to be taking this pawn and going to be a pawn up again. So the game is very much on. It's very interesting still. Comes rook d2 check, king e6 and rook c2. So Kasparov knows that in the rook endgame, it's not really the number of pawns, but you just have to activate your rook. And that's what's happening. So rook g5, rook c7, but after rook b5, rook h7, rook takes b2, black is simply up a pawn again. So Carlsen is up a pawn. Here comes a4, Carlsen plays a5, and in this position, I think Kasparov thought that he has very good chances to save this, and again got a bit careless. So the best move would have been probably just to play king f4, trying to go for some counterplay, and well, it's very likely that that Kasparov could save this with king f4. But he played a very careless move. He played the move h4, and here again I invite you to stop the video and try to figure out the best continuation for black. So now both of the pawns of white are on the 4th rank, and the best move is just playing rook b4 that Carlsen did. That doesn't only attack all the pawns, but also cuts off the white king. So yeah, the position is once again very hard for the ex-world champion Garry Kasparov, and he actually makes the move that is just losing. So he plays the move rook h6, but both players only had very little time. So he plays rook h6, and here again I invite you to stop the video and try to figure out how to save the position how to win the position by black. So the point is here that Kasparov obviously wants to take this g6 pawn, and actually this construction of b7 and a5 pawns are not very easy to defend. So if white takes this pawn, then transfers to rook, then it's very unlikely that black is able to protect these pawns without the help of his king. So this is actually the crucial move. Black should put his king to his queenside pawns to protect. And after king d7, rook g6, rook h4, black is going to take the a4 pawn sooner or later. The black king can go to protect his pawns, and black will just be up by 2 pawns and easily winning. So this was the way to win the game, but this is not what Carlsen did. Carlsen made one last bad move, and this threw away the potential victory. So he played the move king f7. Here Kasparov played h5. Carlsen, Kasparov, it's so easy to mess this up. So h5, gh, rook h5, and as I told you before, the problem for black is that he cannot defend these pawns very well. So if he takes on a4, then Kasparov can just play rook b5, threatening to take this pawn, and if black plays rook b4, well, then there's actually multiple ways to draw this. The pawn endgame is just a simple draw. The white king is too close, but you can also just take the other pawn as well. This is also very drawish. So for that reason, to rook takes h5, Carlsen can just not take the pawn. And play the move b6, but after rook e5, his king is cut off, and still the position is similar, so he can still not take on a4 because rook b5 is coming, and white is also taking a pawn. So here came king f6. Kasparov again played the best move, rook e4. He knows that the pawn ending is just draw. Comes rook b3, king d2, king f5, rook h4, king e5, some moves, and then finally they go for this pawn ending, but the pawn ending is just drawn. Comes king e5, and here Kasparov played the textbook move, king e3, opposition, and making sure that the game is going to end in a draw. King d5, king d3, they repeated a bit, and then they decided to eliminate the pawns and agree in a draw. So this was the epic game between Magnus Carlsen and Garry Kasparov. It's a bit of a pity that the starting position was so regular, and also that these guys met so early in the tournament, so the stake was not that high. But it was really nice to see this Kasparov-Carlsen matchup after 16 years. Also, it's known that Kasparov was the trainer of Carlsen at some point. So yeah, very great game. So in the future, I'm going to continue my coverage from this Feher random tournament. So you can expect a lot more Kasparov and Carlsen games. So see you then.